welcome to the UPS Supply Chain Virtual Connect Conference. I'm Ron Jordan. I'm responsible for global freight forwarding sales at UPS. I'm joined by two distinguished guests that will be part of the customer panel this morning, Marcos Meireles and Robert Palmer. Before we begin, let me ask Bob to introduce himself and company Emerson.
Sure, thanks. Bob Palmer. I've been with Emerson about 25 years, and again, started in a bit of a circuitous way, starting as a drummer, but I've moved through logistics in both the logistics provider area, 3PL area, and manufacturing and retail. So with Emerson, we're a global manufacturing company and technology company that specializes in two platforms. One is commercial and residential solutions, and the other is automation solutions, which is primarily oil and gas, chemical industry, and the commercial residential solutions is more incinerator, rigid tool company, and companies like that.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks very much for that. And Robert Palmer, for those, Natalie and Anna, who are helping us record all this and put this together, had no idea who Robert Palmer was. But we do. As a musician, we're very familiar. Bob, thanks for joining us. I'll go to Marcos in Seagate. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Ron. So very glad to be here. Marcos Meireles. I work for Seagate. I'm responsible for the supply chain at Seagate. And Seagate is a storage company, so we enable the data sphere. So you can thank us for being able to have a virtual seminar like this one. I'm an electrical engineer by training, but have moved to supply chain, freight logistics for quite some time with roles in France, Japan, United States, and I'm currently now in Singapore. So looking forward for this conversation.
Great, thanks. And based in Singapore, you're close to the action. That majority of your supplier base, et cetera, out there, is that why you're out there?
That's correct. That's where a lot of the action is, and our main kind of final factories are here. Most of our suppliers are here, even though it's it's a fairly global. So we have suppliers and factories everywhere, but a lot of the action happens in Asia. Being Singapore makes it very easy to move around and get in touch with all of them.
That's great. Yeah, we've got both our guests. Thank you very much for joining again. Emerson and Seagate, you're global in nature. And the discussion topic we're going to address today is one of the 5 megatrends that we're seeing in the industry: globalization, e-commerce, digitalization, sustainability, and we're going to talk about supply chain resilience. So thank you very much for joining. The first one, kind of a softball question, because we've all lived through the past 2 years of supply chain chaos. But over the past 2 years, how have you and your company adjusted to meet the supply chain disruption that we're experiencing now? And Bob, I'll go to you first.
Sure. Well, from a transportation perspective, some of the things that we've looked at and have probably had to do a bit differently is understanding crisis leadership and trying to understand how we address that. So we kind of dusted off some rules that started to make sense to us when we went through this. And the first one was when, in February, March of 2020, the first thing was don't panic and don't instill panic, right? So we tried to drive that through our people. And then the next was we need to dust off contingency plans and make sure they were effective contingency plans. So we started with, we need to keep it simple, right? Aim small, miss small. So we decided our plans need to be fairly simple in nature. And then we moved to our strategy first, and then support that with tactics, right? So figure out what the strategy needs to be to address this crisis that was heading our way, and then get ahead of the curve, right? We started chartering planes in February, right? Which was pretty far ahead of the curve for a lot of people who were chartering planes. And we looked at that as an insurance policy, right? That even if we couldn't fill them up, we had the ability to move cargo if we needed to, right? And same thing with our containers. We started pre-booking containers out of Asia specifically, right? Because that was where of the crisis was. Then lead, follow, or get out of the way, right? So we're telling all our people we need to be leaders in this. We need to start moving really fast. And so we had these 10 rules that we put in place. And another thing that happens during a crisis is people climb all over each other. So we started, stay in your lane. Overlapping responsibilities just going to cause confusion. Going to move up into the problematic area of complexity and panicking. So, and another thing we started with was this: you're never going to have perfect data. You need to be directionally correct. You don't need to get into analysis paralysis. So those are some of the lessons learned and some of the things that we had to institute that was a bit different, different mindset going into this supply chain disruption, which we went into contingency mode, and we're still in contingency mode. We had no idea that we're going to be contingency mode going into our third year. So those are some of the key points that we pushed along during this supply chain disruption that is frankly still going on, right?
Yeah, of course. And I like it. You started strategy. One, don't crawl all over each other. Get a strategy, moved on to tactics, and then the execution of we need to get some lift. We need to pre-book containers. And I, as a hockey player, I skate your lane. Everybody's got to play their position, right? That's good, really good. Marcos, same question over to you and at Seagate. What were some of the things that you were challenged with?
From our perspective, what we saw is that, when things start to get very, very constricted, and it was time to really execute on the strategy that we had in place for some time. So and if that strategy, every place on that strategy that was giving us some additional resilience, that's where we saw benefit. And the biggest area where we saw that it made a big difference was actually on areas where we had a more strategic relationship with our suppliers, where it was not just transactional. We had some joint goals, and we were very close to each other. So those relationships made a big difference because everybody had to get very tactical. Right? We had to get into daily calls, disseminate information within the company very quickly, be able to get kind of feedback from the employees very quickly on areas that they're having issues, and then engage our suppliers to help us out when there was some disruption. And if we were close to the supplier and we had a good relationship and fairly strategic to them, we got support, and that made a big difference. So it's one of those things that we cannot emphasize more. So as we look into the future, it is time to do a refresh on the strategy, but looking also on those areas where we saw significant benefit of not being transactional with suppliers, and that's part of our plan. The other area where we saw that we benefited quite a bit was when we had very good visibility into the supply base. Not only our first tier supplier, but their suppliers and their suppliers. So it's in some cases we had very good understanding of what was going on, and when disruptions kind of hit, we understood where we could pivot and make some changes. In some areas, not as much, and as we look forward, that's one of the places where we want to emphasize.
You hit on two things that are critical. One, close to your suppliers, and there's a relationship and a partnership, not just tactical. The other one was visibility, and I was going to ask that. You jumped right into it. The technology piece, obviously you're a technology company, but have you seen changes in that, or is it just a natural continuous update of engaging with your suppliers with visibility tools, et cetera?
It's interesting because we ask ourselves that question when the visibility was not there. Everybody kind of was very quick to jump and blame technology, right? Oh, that's not a good system. I should implement a different system. And I questioned that. I said to the team, okay, go back and really look, is it the system that's a problem, or we are not really using it? We're not really engaging with suppliers. We're not really doing the work of mapping our supply chain much deeper than we were before. And I think you guessed the answer, right? I mean, the system was okay. I mean, that was not the biggest problem. The biggest problem was really us and the data and how we're using the system. So we clearly kind of had to do something about that. We engaged with the system provider, got some additional insight on how to use the system, and then went through a process that's still going on going deeper and deeper, better and better visibility and into the supply chain.
Yeah, thanks. Great answer. I really appreciate that, because companies need to, if we're talking about the entire ecosystem of logistics and supply chain, right? So the incremental investments made in technology and systems are going to help us all move down that path. But great answer, Marcos. Thank you very much for that. Bob, I'm going to call you Robert Palmer a couple more times today, but Bob, hey, this next question. Historically, logistics and supply chain have focused on, and talking transportation specifically, efficiency and cost-effective solutions. Greater efficiency, reducing cost year over year, et cetera, brought on the lack in or deterioration of flexibility. Since we've been through the last 2 years, has Emerson and Bob Palmer, have you guys made changes in the way you look at how you source, how you negotiate, et cetera?
Well, we absolutely have, but I mean, I would say we were somewhat balanced. We were a very cost reduction focused company, right? And we had to shift some of that focus to capacity, right? So that part of that back of the insurance policy with chartering is it became less of a cost reduction versus a cost avoidance, right? Because rates were skyrocketing and becoming, you know, it was the Wild West. There was no method to the madness. So we instituted kind of a process of managing and measuring those Wild West pricing scenarios that we had to go through, and booking capacity, right? And grabbing as much capacity we could in our key lanes. And we had the benefit of having a global TMS system. And part of our contingency plan is also that manual communication to keep everybody on the same page, right? So it's kind of as a backup redundancy. So yeah, I would say we absolutely did change, but you know, from a customer service standpoint, we were still able to keep our factories supplied and keep our customers supplied. None of them were happy with the transit times that we're enjoying today, but we do our best we can, and we really have driven pretty good performance considering the environment that we're in, because of that approach.
Yeah, good, fantastic. Thanks for that. And I'll tell you, just a side note. I was in the gym the other day, and people near me started talking about supply chain issues. It cracks me up, because I can tell you, my mother never knew what I did until this past year when she couldn't get a microwave. But it's not necessarily the supply chain that is the problem. It's shortage of supply throughout the entire chain, right? To your point, Bob, you move things, you chartered vessels, chartered aircraft, you've got vessels pre-booked, et cetera. Seagate, Marcos, you did the same things. You made contingency plans. But this volatility in rates and costs certainly had an impact. Same question over to you, Marcos. Focus on efficiency. You always have to do that. That's what you should focus on. But when the tide changed, did it inhibit some of your flexibility, or were you able to pivot?
It was a challenge. In supply chain in general, we have been told and have been practicing for so long that inventory is bad. We just have to do things just in time. We know exactly how long it's going to take to get the part. We have how long the part is going to go from this to this, and how long transportation takes place. And we do all this work to reduce, and gets tighter and tighter and tighter. All of a sudden, this is all kind of out the window, right? It is. We never know when a border will close. We never know when it's going to have a labor shortage in a port, right? We never knew when the flights that your cargo was on would be just not take off and be canceled. we're still dealing to this day with disruptions in a few of the countries that we operate just because of outbreaks of COVID. And then that just in time, you have just the bare minimum that you need, and you know with precision how things are moving. Didn't quite work, right? I mean, and that's it was a very quick pivot to okay, let's understand the areas where there is more risk, and let's see what we can do to relax a little bit some of those policies and get a little bit more available. So as there are kind of ups and downs, and on the lead times, parts lead times, transportation lead times, we can accommodate those changes what we couldn't before. Not an easy thing, and it's also it doesn't matter if you have 99 out of 100 parts. You need 100 parts, right? So we have to kind of really do this in a way that it takes care of everything. But that was the biggest change. We had to very quickly pivot to that, and now we have continued to manage that way. But looking a little bit forward is okay, when we go back to taking some of that stuff away, and what is the balance kind of we'll end up. And it's probably going to be not exactly where we were before, not exactly where we are right now, but somewhere in the middle.
Good deal. I'm going to stick with you for a minute because you brought something up, and it's crossing borders. Were Seagate able to change sourcing locations? Did you need to do that, or did you stick with your tier 1 and 2 suppliers in the countries you were working with them, or did you have to source from a different location?
From a tier 1 perspective, not significant changes. Maybe not even tier 2. But when you start going a little bit deeper, we had to get creative a couple of times, right? And that's that happened.
Yeah, listen, that's a big one. And as I'll just put in a plug here for UPS. One of the things about being a global service provider, you've got to be in those locations. I was talking to another gentleman the other day, and they had to change sourcing locations, and the commodity code was different as well, the HTS code. So you needed to be able to pivot, get your customs clearance done, have the right transit time and all that. So crossing borders becomes a bit of a challenge, or an added challenge to what we're doing. Bob, I'll come back to you. What areas were the most impacted going through this? Was it inventory? And what changes do you think you and Emerson needed to do to make those changes as minimal as possible?
Well, we started with pushing out recommendations from day one. One was, you need to start building inventory. I know inventory is bad, but it's better than not having any. And increase lead times, because transit times are going to increase. So lead times to customers, lead times from suppliers, you needed to push those out. And, we had some who were not exactly thrilled with doing that, but we warned everybody that they needed to start doing that right away. And then we shifted our focus to on-time delivery, transit times and lead times, and capacity management, right? And we can't say that enough about the capacity management. And we kind of looked at it as mode shift management, right? We had some areas like Singapore as an example, where it got to a point where it was easier and cheaper and faster to move some stuff parcel than it was on an air forwarder, right? And because ocean was getting clogged, we've got thousands and thousands of suppliers around the world, and over 200 plants that we're trying to supply. And when you can't get anything out of Singapore for a week, up into Shanghai, because you're going from one problematic area to another problematic area, you have to pivot and figure out another way to do that. So that out of the box thinking and just simple but creative was really where we shifted to.
Good deal. Since you brought up Singapore, I'll have Marcos give you his phone number. Next time you have that issue, you can give him a call.
There you go.
That'd be great.
No problem.
I
have a big car. I can help you. No problem.
I got two 20-footers coming through there this week.
Yeah, perfect. Listen, it's all about connections, right? You guys have mentioned it a couple different times. It's having that relationship, whether it's a tier 1 supplier, whether it's your logistics provider, or whether it's your partners in different functions in your organizations. It's all about that communication and making sure things work. So glad I was able to connect you two on this during this conference. Just looking forward, Marcos, changes, incremental or sweeping changes. What is the direction for Seagate going forward?
No, I touched on a couple of things, and we're going to double down on them. I feel like we were a little bit precise on the relationship part. We knew that there would be some tightness on the market, and there were a couple of areas that we are already kind of working on a more strategic relationship. I didn't predict this thing at all, right? I'm not saying that, but we knew there was going to happen some things, and then we were in a better position when that happened. So we want to continue to do the same. And I also kind of want to take the opportunity that a lot of our suppliers are more open to discuss their supply chain than they were before, and go deeper. I say it's very interesting. I mean, a lot of times when we're talking to a supplier and say, "Hey, tell me your supplier. I mean, give me some information," and it's like, "Oh no, that's a secret. I cannot tell you. That's a secret. I cannot tell you." Until they couldn't deliver, and then they were very easy, kind of very quick to point to say, "Hey, supplier X, Y, and Z. Those are the ones that are short me. Here's their phone number and name and email address. Kind of go there and help me." So that openness I want to take advantage of that and get deeper, because I don't know what the next disruption is going to be. I just want to be able to be faster to identify the issue and react to it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'll tell you what, I want to drop the microphone right now, because what you talked about was exactly resiliency, right? Be able to react faster, turn that dial however you need to, and the people we're working with all throughout the ecosystem of the supply chain are more flexible. So great comments. Thank you very much for that. Bob, a final word with you. Looking at the business and the things that changed over the last couple of years, the direction for Emerson, are you making sweeping changes, incremental changes? What are the key areas?
I think some of the same that Marcos was talking about, that resiliency thing, but from a more tactical thing, we were looking at more consolidation. Consolidating also greens up a little bit, right? Less exceptions, trying to manage through those and continue down our automation journey, right? We're trying to automate everything as much as we can and reduce the exception that we have to manage. Reduce the complexity of our organization and of our supply chain and of our logistics function, and get better, I call it better relationship leadership, right? So get better at those relationships. I think some of the forwarders who I deal with and carriers are seeing a different side of me, because we have to work together. It's no longer a competitive nature. It's about capacity, about service, about on-time delivery, less about price, right? It's more about cost than price. So that's really where we're going to be focusing on for the time being.
Bob, thanks very much for that. That's perfect. Both of you guys, with your closing comments or your answer to that last question, are drop the mic moments. They're spot on. Is talking about resiliency, flexibility, working with your partnerships, communication, and driving technology to help us all do that. That's fantastic. Listen, Marcos Meireles and Robert Palmer, thank you both very much for being part of our customer panel discussion. I look forward to working with you in the future, and thank you very much for all your continued support, and have a great afternoon. Thanks very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Ron, glad to be here. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.